Chapter 572. Jingyu didn't have a mother, so Mei Jinghe came out to entertain her. After all, she was Jingyu's Anin name, Jingzheng's second son, Jinghong. Now, he was increasingly favored by some scholars and had a lot of good reviews. The only thing left was the marriage between Jingyin and the second prince. Xiao Jingran was unwilling to marry Jingyin no matter what, which angered the emperor greatly. The emperor decreed that the wedding should be held in the 8th month of the year. Who would have thought that Xiao Jingran would go to the border alone just before the wedding was about to be held? The wedding was delayed again and again, and no one knew what it was like now. Before Jingyu came back, it was said that Jingyin couldn't bear the humiliation and went to the temple to recuperate. She would be back in a few days. Now that Xiao Jingran was also in the imperial city, no one knew what the wedding would be like. Father, you're biased. At the dining table, Jingyu looked at such a big table of food and was immediately unhappy. Jing Zhan and Jing Lang were slightly surprised as they looked at the dissatisfied Jingyu. Xiao Qing came, and you made so much delicious food. I didn't even get to eat at home. Jingyu looked at Jing Zhan and Jing Lang with a face full of hidden bitterness. The two of them didn't know whether to laugh or cry when they heard her words. Silly girl, father wants to curry favor with the 9th emperors. This way, the 9th emperors will remember father's kindness and will treat you well in the future. Jing Zhan coughed and pretended to speak very softly to Jingyu. Jingyu's eyes widened when she heard this. She pretended to be serious as she nodded and said, "That's true." Cough, cough. Xiao Qin's eyes were full of smiles. He coughed and said as he ate, "The dishes at the prime minister's residence are more delicious than the ones at the prince's residence. Father-in-law is very considerate." Haha, eat more. After the meal, Jingyu and Xiao Chun took a stroll in the backyard. Jingyu leaned on his walking stick as he watched Xiao Chun and Jingyu holding hands beside the pond. He felt gratified. Father. Jing Lang stepped forward and stood beside Jing Zhan. He looked up and saw Jingyu standing on a large rock, baring her fangs and brandishing her claws as she pounced on Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun was shocked and quickly caught Jingyu, who was pouncing on him. There was a faint reproach on his face, but it was gentle and loving. The 9 emperors are doing very well. Jing Zhan sighed in relief and said, "Seeing you like this, I'm relieved. Father, I didn't want you to marry the 9th emperors. What the royal family said is not good." Jing Lang also sighed in relief and said, "However, looking at the 9th emperors doing this for Jingyu, I feel lucky. Fortunately, you is marrying the 9th emperors." What news came from the palace? Jing Zhan looked at Jing Lang and asked, "I sent someone to inquire about it. It's an earth-shattering news." Jing Lang took a deep breath and looked at Xiao Chun with uncertainty. He looked at the two of them walking away and said faintly, "Before the wedding, the 9th emperors took you to the palace. The emperor wants to arrest the 9th emperors." The emperor has been enduring for so many years. He watched 9th imperial uncle's power slowly accumulate. He didn't take it seriously. But he didn't expect that when there was a crisis, it was already too late. As the emperor, he didn't dare to touch Xiao Wangfu, or rather, he couldn't touch it. How unbearable is this for an emperor who is the supreme ruler? Sure enough, he still exploded. Jing Zhan's lips curled into a smile of understanding as he spoke in admiration. Chapter 573. That's what happened. Jing Lang nodded and replied, "However, what happened after that was truly terrifying. I don't know the specifics, but I do know that the matter of whether the imperial edict was real or fake did exist. The previous emperor intended to pass the throne to the 9th emperors, but the 9th emperors didn't care about it at all." That's reasonable. Jing Zhan nodded lightly in response. After that, he made it clear that the 9th emperors didn't want to inherit the throne. There was only one reason he entered the palace, and that was to marry you. Jing Lang's heart was filled with emotions. When he thought of the news he saw, the shock in his heart couldn't be calmed down for a long time. For a woman, Xiao Chun actually went to such an extent. Jing Lang was shocked, but at the same time, he was incomparably gratified. For such a man to marry Jingyu, he would definitely treat Jingyu well in the future. This was something that didn't need to be verified to be certain. In the corridor, Jing Lang and Jing Zhan finally let go of the uneasiness that had been in their hearts for a long time. They could rest assured that Jing Yu would be handed over to the Ninth Emperors. Jing Yu and Xiao Qin didn't know what Jing Zhan and Jing Lang were thinking. At this moment, they were walking and stopping to sit down in a pavilion to rest. Comparing it like this, I suddenly feel that the prince's palace is more familiar. I haven't been able to stay in the prime minister's palace for long. Jing Yu looked around at the exquisiteness of the surroundings and said lightly. Xiao Qin was silent for a moment, then said lightly, "If you miss it, you can come back and stay at any time." Xiao Qin said lightly. This time, it was Jing Yu's turn to be silent. She had asked Qinggu before. Her father's legs hadn't actually recovered, but he had used a miraculous medicine to allow Jing Zhan to stand for a short period of time. Because Jing Zhan said that he wanted to attend his daughter's wedding grandly, the medicine would soon lose its effect and Jing Zhan would have to endure an intense pain that no one else could understand. Xiao Qin, Qinggu is going back to Miracle Medical Valley, right? Jing Yu pursed her lips and asked Xiao Qin. Okay. Xiao Qin narrowed his eyes and held Jing Yu's hand tightly. Daddy is about to leave with Qinggu soon. I've always felt so stuffy in my heart. Jing Yu leaned towards Xiao Qin and said with a frown, "This is a good thing for father. But why do I feel so uncomfortable? I feel like something bad is going to happen." Don't overthink it. Xiao Qin gently patted Jing Yu's head and said, "I will send people to protect you. If there is a chance, perhaps we can take the opportunity to visit Miracle Physician Valley." Do you have a way to get in? Jing Yu's eyes lit up as she looked at Xiao Qin with sparkling eyes. A person can think of a way. Xiao Qin's lips curled up. He leaned against the wooden railing and said, "The Crown Prince's wedding is in a month and a half. Qinggu may leave then." The Crown Prince's wedding? Jing Yu's heart skipped a beat. She said, "Is the Crown Prince preparing to make a move?" "Yes," Xiao Qin said indifferently. "The illness that has not been cured for many years should be cured by now." Jing Yu raised her eyebrows, but didn't say anything. She leaned on Xiao Qin's shoulder and didn't say anything. After that, the two of them went to Jing Zhan's study and talked to him. They also told him that Qinggu was about to leave. Jing Zhan sighed in relief. "Ninth Emperors, I am very relieved that is in your hands." This was the last thing Jing Zhan said to Xiao Qin before he left. Xiao Qin didn't reply. He bowed slightly to Jing Zhan and took Jing Yu back to the palace. Chapter 574. 1.5 months passed quickly. Jing Yu had nothing to do in the prince's mansion. Xiao Qin, on the other hand, was very busy. Whenever he was free, he would hug Jing Yu and rub their heads together. Their days were very enjoyable. Qinggu was about to leave, so he would come to disturb Jing Yu every once in a while. Ninth sister-in-law, look at this case. How big is the risk of surgery? Can you use Chinese medicine to treat it? Also, Qinggu asked Jing Yu all kinds of questions almost every day. At the beginning, Jing Yu would explain patiently, but later on, she was almost driven crazy by these questions. As long as she saw Qinggu, she would hide or run away. Ninth sister-in-law. At this time, Qinggu was making a fuss again. Our Jing Yu already knew her place and climbed onto the roof, lying down silently. "Ugly woman, is it really good for us to treat Brother Godly Doctor like this?" Ijun had grown taller and his face was rosy. He held a medium-sized Rubik's Cube in his hand. At this time, he was lying on the roof with Jing Yu. He tilted his head and looked at Jing Yu as he asked, "Brat, call me sister." Jing Yu raised her hand and hit him on the head. Ijun grimaced and held his head, saying silently, "Ugly woman. Hey, you brat." Jing Yu immediately glared at him. The two people lying on the roof stared at each other. Ninth sister-in-law, where are you?" When the shouts came from below, Jing Yu and Ijun immediately shrunk their heads and hid themselves well. They were determined not to make a sound. "Lord Qinggu," the imperial concubine, went out. Yin Xiao's voice sounded. "She went out again?" Qing Ji's voice was filled with surprise. "Then," he said unhappily, "you are already married. Why are you running around every day?" Sigh. "Missing Xiao, ninth sister-in-law, is back. You have to inform me." "Okay, I will inform you when I am free." Yin Xiao answered naturally. However, Yin Xiao was tired of saying this. I will inform you when I am free, but I am not free every day. Why? Because if the imperial concubine wants me to be busy, then I am naturally busy. Qinggu left with a heart full of displeasure. Jingyu, who was hiding on the roof, watched Qinggu leave. Only then did she heave a deep sigh of relief. Was it easy for her to avoid this fellow? Imperial concubine, you can come down now. Lord Qinggu has left. Yin Xiao stood below the room and raised her head to shout towards the roof. Yin Xiao saw Jingyu climb down the stairs and couldn't help but smile. Jingyu stood on the ground and sighed deeply. Yijun was also helped down. The two of them looked at each other and then silently turned to enter the room. Yijun buried his head in his Rubik's Cube. Jingyu, on the other hand, had nothing to do. She read storybooks and ate. In the blink of an eye, 1.5 months passed. During this time, Lu Miaoqiu couldn't be seen at all. She often sat in restaurants with Shangguan Linglan to eat and drink. Sometimes, she would go out of the city to play with Yin Jian and Yin Feng. After the New Year, the 5th day of the New Year was the day of the Crown Prince's wedding. As the 9th imperial concubine, Jingyu naturally had to attend. The imperial palace was also filled with jubilation. The Crown Prince's wedding wasn't a particularly big matter. However, the emperor seemed to want to make it a big deal. He even wanted to hold a big banquet in the imperial palace and invited all the nobles in the imperial palace. The night was silent. In the imperial palace, Xiao Ye's face was pale as he sat on the dragon throne. A guard stood beside him and quietly waited for Xiao Ye's reaction. Chapter 575. Is the news reliable? Xiao Yi asked with a frown as he tapped his dragon throne. It is. The guard bowed and said, I'm afraid that the other 3 countries have received the same news. The hidden clans have come out of seclusion. The Holy Family has come from the northern pastoral region to Tokyo. The Maoshan sect, Shaolin Temple, and other monks have also come out. The Holy Family has arrived at Tokyo? Xiao Yi narrowed his eyes and asked. Yes, they arrived yesterday. The guard nodded. On the 5th day of the lunar year, invite the Holy Family to the palace to attend the Crown Prince's wedding. Xiao Yi said lightly. Yes. The guard bowed. Under the flickering candlelight, something seemed to be stirring. The atmosphere of the new year was lively, and the Crown Prince's wedding was even more joyous. The palace was very busy. On the morning of the 5th day of the lunar year, Jingyu was dressed up. She put on the clothes of the 9th imperial concubine and followed Xiao Chun into the palace. In the carriage, Jingyu frowned slightly. She opened the curtains and looked outside. She felt strange and said, Why do I feel like there are more people patrolling the streets? The Crown Prince's wedding, and he invited all the officials to the palace. This is a very meaningful move. Xiao Chen's eyes were cold as he said, Not long ago, I received news that the Holy Family will arrive at Tokyo in a few days. Jingyu, you have to be careful. The Holy Family is coming? Jingyu's heart trembled. Her eyes narrowed with a dangerous light. I'm not sure yet. Someone is deliberately obscuring my information. They are sending Xing Heir to investigate. There should be a result tonight. Xiao Chen put his hand on Jingyu's shoulder and said, Just get through today safely. Be careful at the banquet. Okay. Jingyu put away her playful thoughts and slowly calmed down. This matter was too important, so Jingyu had to be careful. A sedan had already been prepared at the entrance of the palace. When Jingyu arrived at the banquet hall with Xiao Chun, almost everyone had arrived. This was the first time that Jingyu appeared as the 9th princess's concubine. Everyone looked at her meaningfully. Jingyu felt an extremely hot gaze staring at her. She slowly raised her head and saw Xiao Jingran sitting on her left. She hadn't seen Xiao Jingran for a long time. Jingyu was slightly startled when she saw Xiao Jingran's hostile expression. He really looked like he had been on the battlefield and killed people. That feeling of being bathed in blood was actually brought here. In the end, she was still too inexperienced. She couldn't even control her aura. She couldn't compare with Xiao Chun. Jingyu tilted her head and avoided Xiao Chen's gaze. She followed Xiao Chun to the high seat on his right and slowly sat down. Then the emperor, the empress, and the empress dowager all arrived. Xiao Chun sat there expressionlessly. However, when Xiao Yi and the Empress Dowager saw Xiao Qin, their expressions changed uncomfortably. However, it disappeared in an instant and no one noticed. The Crown Prince only needed a few words from the Emperor and the Empress Dowager to decide if he wanted to take a concubine. There was no such thing as bowing to heaven and earth and being sent to the bridal chamber. Jingyu watched as the Crown Prince and Lu Miaoqiu received everyone's congratulations. She watched as the palace maids and nannies helped Lu Miaoqiu put on the Crown Princess's formal attire and crown. The ceremony was complete. In the eyes of outsiders, this was a noble and honorable occasion. However, in Jingyu's eyes, it was a bit sad. Compared to her wedding with Xiao Chun, Jingyu undoubtedly felt that she was blessed. Perhaps everyone saw things differently. Chapter 576. After Jingyu saw that the ceremony was over, she pulled Xiao Qin forward to toast. In this kind of situation, the Crown Prince should be the one toasting Xiao Qian. However, Jingyu had forcefully pulled him away. When the officials saw Jingyu's actions, they were somewhat alarmed. Miaoqiu. Jingyu held Lu Miaoqiu's hand with a face full of joy. Yeah. Lu Miaoqiu's cheeks were faintly pink as she smiled gently at Jingyu. Jingyu pulled Lu Miaoqiu to the side and looked around. When she saw Shangguan Linglan looking in their direction, Jingyu hurriedly waved for Shangguan Linglan to come over. Aya, I thought you were going to ignore me. Shangguan Linglan ran over excitedly. He looked at Jingyu and Lu Miaoqiu and said with a sigh, "How did the two of you get married in the blink of an eye? I'm the only one left. Lan Lan, you should also pay attention to your marriage," Lu Miaoqiu said coquettishly as she glared at Shangguan Linglan. Miaoqiu, don't worry about him. Jingyu looked at Shangguan Linglan with disdain and said, "I heard that many young masters went to your residence to propose marriage. However, they all went in vertically and came out horizontally. With your speed, I'm afraid you won't be able to get married for the rest of your life." Lu Miaoqiu covered her mouth and laughed. She looked at Shangguan Linglan's embarrassed appearance, and her heart was filled with helplessness. Those young masters were all full of nonsense. They couldn't even withstand one blow from me. How can I marry such a man? Shangguan Linglan crossed his arms and said arrogantly, "You're really picky." Jingyu bared her teeth and looked at Shangguan Linglan. The three of them chatted for a while before they saw the Crown Prince turn around and bring Lu Miaoqiu to offer tea to the Emperor and Empress Dowager. Xiao Qin also looked at Jingyu. In the blink of an eye, the two people beside Shangguan Linglan dispersed. Shangguan Linglan was left alone, and he sighed helplessly. He turned and returned to his seat. In the past, he had never considered marriage. On the other side, Jingyu and Xiao Chan returned to their seats. After the Crown Prince offered tea, all the officials came forward to congratulate the Crown Prince. Singing and dancing sounded, and the banquet entered a lively stage. Jingyu enjoyed the singing and dancing while eating. Xiao Qin looked for delicious food and fed it to Jingyu from time to time. Jingyu did the same. The two of them went back and forth, and the people around them were a little shy. When had they ever seen the high and mighty ninth emperors so attentive to someone? Jingyu ate to her heart's content. Every time she looked up, she would see Xiao Jingran's fiery eyes. This made her frown slightly. Who else could it be but Jingyu sitting beside Xiao Jingran? They hadn't seen each other for a long time, and Jingyan had become quieter. She sat beside Xiao Jingran as if she was invisible. She could often hear people talking about how shameless Jingyan was. The second prince was unwilling to marry her, and she was still clinging to the second prince. These words were full of ridicule. Let alone Jingyan. Even Jingyu couldn't bear to listen to them. Jingyu glanced at Jingyan and sighed silently. She felt a little tired and moved to Xiao Qin's side. Leaning against Xiao Qin, Xiao Qin glanced sideways at Jingyu. He raised his hand and held Jingyu's waist to make her more comfortable. Chapter 577. At this moment, the originally lively music suddenly stopped. Everyone who was drinking and chatting stopped what they were doing and looked around in confusion. Finally, their gazes landed on Xiao Yi, who was sitting on the high seat. Jingyu also had a look of confusion. Could it be that the emperor had some other performance? My beloved ministers, This emperor is fortunate to have invited the people of the hidden clan to come and congratulate the crown prince. Xiaoyi slowly straightened his body and looked around. Then he lightly said, "The people of the hidden clan who came to my Tokyo this time are members of the Holy Family. I believe that my beloved ministers have some understanding of this Holy Family. Rumor has it that they can predict the future and support people with different pupils who control beasts. This time, they came to my Tokyo in search of people with different pupils." Xiao Ye's words lightly rang out in the hall. Everyone's eyes were filled with confusion. With regards to this remote hidden clan, they knew almost nothing. The only thing they knew were the strange rumors that they heard from the old people. The most they heard from the previous kings was probably this king who was searching for the elixir of immortality. People with different pupils, there were rumors about them many years ago. However, only the high-ranking officials of the country knew about them. The common people did not know about them. Now that Xiaoyi suddenly said these words in this peaceful world, everyone's expressions changed. Among them, Jing Yan's expression changed. When she heard Xiaoyi say the words, "people with different pupils," Jing Yan's heart suddenly tightened. She widened her eyes in horror and looked unnaturally at Jing Yu. However, she immediately lowered her head and did not dare to raise it again. Jing Yu and Xiao Qin's expressions also suddenly became serious. Everyone looked at Xiaoyi and waited for him to speak. "Someone come. Invite our friends from the hidden clan up." Xiaoyi smiled faintly and waved his hand. Hearing this, everyone turned their heads and looked towards the entrance of the main hall. A few figures slowly appeared at the entrance of the main hall. The two old men in the lead were dressed in gray and white robes. They gave off a sage-like feeling. The 3 or 4 people following behind them were slightly younger. They had a pair of clear and dark eyes. After scanning the surroundings, they continued to move forward. His cold and aloof appearance made him look like a member of a hidden family. Everyone watched as the member of the Holy Family walked up to Xiaoyi with his chest puffed out. He didn't kneel, nor did he bend his waist. He just stood there and said coldly, "Greetings, Your Majesty, the Tokyo Emperor." "Ha ha ha. Everyone, please be at ease." Xiaoyi didn't get angry. He smiled and raised his hand to let them be at ease. He called for someone to bring over chairs and said, "It must have been hard for you all to come from afar. Please take a seat. Your Majesty, there's no need to be so polite. We're only here to find someone with a different pupil." The old man in the lead said faintly. He looked slightly older and was clearly the leader of this group. "May I know if the 2 of you are from the Holy Family?" Xiao Ye's expression didn't change. He turned his head slightly and asked the 2 of them, "I am Mingyan, the 5th elder of the Holy Family. This is the 6th elder, Yinshan." The 5th elder Ming and cupped his hands slightly to Xiaoyi. Xiaoyi smiled and agreed. He casually chatted with the 2 for a while before allowing them to sit down and rest. "The 2 elders claim that you have come to search for people with different pupils. In that case, may I ask how the 2 elders are searching? Could it be that you only rely on your eyes to distinguish?" Seeing Ming and Yinshan sit down, Crown Prince Xiao Yuling opened his mouth and asked somewhat doubtfully, Chapter 578. Your Highness Crown Prince, our Holy Family has our own treasures. This mirror is a treasure passed down from generation to generation in the Holy Family. As long as someone has different pupils, if they shine this mirror in their eyes, the mirror will reflect their pupils. That person is someone with different pupils. If they see black pupils, then they are not someone with different pupils. Mengyan's lips curled into a proud smile as he spoke. Xiao Ye's eyes revealed a look of curiosity when he heard this. Everyone also felt that it was incomparably mysterious. They had never seen such a divine object before. In that case, why don't Elder Ming try it on the people in the hall? Xiao Ye's eyebrows slightly raised as he spoke. This old man has the same idea. Mengyan nodded with a smile. The Holy Family has always had different pupils. Since His Majesty has agreed, then why don't we let everyone in the hall try it? Good. Xiao Yi laughed heartily and waved his hand for everyone to try. After everyone heard this, their eyes suddenly revealed a strange, timid look. Who knew if this mirror was really accurate? If it was not accurate, then even if they were not monsters, they would still be called monsters. If that was the case, how could they find someone to talk to? Everyone pushed each other back to hide. Mingyan looked at everyone's reaction, and his eyes revealed a look of displeasure. Jing Yu's heart was beating uncontrollably. Looking at those people from the Holy Family, she cursed fiercely in her heart. Damn it, of all times to come, why did they come now? Xiao Chun held Jing Yu's hand tightly and did not let go. He seemed to be quietly comforting Jing Yu not to worry. What? No one dares to try it. Or is there someone with different pupils hiding among you? Yin Qin's pair of shrewd eyes swept over everyone. Suddenly, everyone's faces turned pale. These words were not spoken carelessly. Who knew if they would be killed because of the word monster? The silence made Xiao Yi, who was sitting on the high seat, frown. Just as Xiao Yi was about to speak, Jing Yin, who had been sitting quietly with her head lowered, stood up first and said, "Since it is His Majesty's order, why don't the two elders let this little girl have a try first?" Ha. Finally, someone who knows what's good for him. Yin Shen laughed out loud. He snatched the mirror from the person beside him and handed it to Jing Yin. Jing Yan's hand trembled slightly as she held the mirror. She suppressed the fear in her heart and looked around at everyone. Finally, her gaze fell on Jing Yu. The corners of her mouth suddenly curled into an ambiguous smile. Jing Yu caught sight of that strange smile. In that instant, Jing Yu felt her heart clench and she started to panic. Jing Yin slowly raised the mirror in her hand in front of everyone. Yin Shen stood behind Jing Yin and also looked at the mirror. In the mirror, Jing Yin closed her eyes slightly and then slowly opened them. She stared at herself in the mirror. Her heart was beating fast, but the pair of black eyes in the mirror didn't change at all. All right, that's not it. Yin Shen frowned. He raised his hand and took Jing Yan's mirror. His announcement made the people around him slowly relax. Thank you, Elder Yin. Jing Yin slowly breathed a sigh of relief and bowed to thank him. Who else? Continue. Yin Shen glanced coldly at Jing Yin. He then turned to the crowd and shouted, Elder Yin, I wonder if you can listen to this little girl? After Yin Shen finished speaking, Jing Yin didn't leave. She still stood in the same place. Chapter 579. She smiled at Yin Shen and Mingyan and said, I feel that in this hall, there is only one person who is most likely to have different pupils. Oh, you know? Yin Shen looked at Jing Yin with interest and asked with a frown, Could it be that you've seen her before? Haha. Jing Yin didn't answer yes or no. She only smiled faintly and said, This little girl would like to ask the two elders if this person with different pupils is definitely someone who can tame beasts. Of course. The saintess with different pupils is the ruler of beasts. This is what our Holy Family says. Is there anything wrong with that? Yin Shen frowned and seemed a little displeased. What do you know? Could it be that you've seen someone who can tame beasts? Mingyan's heart was also filled with excitement as he looked at Jing Yin with a burning gaze. Everyone's gaze was different as they all looked at Jing Yin. Jing Yin's lips curled into a faint smile and she said, I'm not the only one who has seen it. Many of you have seen it before. What? Mingyan and Yin Shen's eyes suddenly lit up. They couldn't hide the excitement in their eyes as they stared at Jing Yin. I don't know if everyone still remembers that 3 years ago, Ninth Imperial Uncle brought a woman into the Imperial City. That woman was able to command wolves. I believe that this incident must have left a deep impression on the second prince, right? Jing Yin smiled and looked sideways at Xiao Jingran, who was sitting on the side. Xiao Jingran's expression changed slightly. It had been so long since that incident. Although no one dared to talk about it, it wasn't like no one remembered it. After Jing Yin mentioned it, everyone suddenly remembered. They looked at each other, and their gazes landed on Jing Yin. Finally, their gazes landed on Jing Yu, who was sitting beside Xiao Chan. Haha. I heard from Imperial concubine Xiang that not only can this woman command wolves, but she can also make poisonous snakes listen to her? Jing Yan's eyes revealed a faint coldness. She tilted her head and looked at Jing Yu. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly as she said, with such great ability, do you think it's very likely that this person has other pupils? Miss, are you serious? Where is this person now? Mingyan rushed in front of Jing Yin and stared at her. That person is in this hall. The corners of Jing Yan's lips curled up slightly. She turned and looked at Jing Yu with a burning gaze. Ninth Imperial Concubine, don't you think so? Aren't you just trying to drag me down with you? Jing Yu was silent for a while, then suddenly smiled. She raised her chin slightly and looked at Jing Yu's determined eyes. It was as if she was certain that Jing Yu was a person with different pupils. This action made Jing Yu's eyes flash with doubt. How could Jing Yin be so confident? In front of so many people, did he not consider the consequences at all when he said that out loud? Or rather, Jing Yin knew that she had abnormal pupils and wanted to use this opportunity to drag her down and ruin her reputation. If that was the case, then how did Jing Yin know that she had abnormal pupils? Jing Yu frowned. She suddenly thought back to last year's New Year's Eve. She had gone out with Jing Yu to buy New Year's goods. During that fight, she seemed to have seen a figure in the corner. At that time, Jing Yu had searched for that figure but was unable to find anything. Now that she thought about it, it was very likely that the figure from that day was Jing Yin. No wonder after that day, Jing Yin would avoid her whenever she saw her. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. Chapter 580. Jing Yu thought that Jing Yin had turned over a new leaf, but she didn't expect her to have a deeper plot. She finally couldn't hold it in any longer after holding it in for an entire year. Jing Yu's eyes revealed a mocking smile. She slowly stood up from her seat and said indifferently, Jing Yin, do you know the crime of slandering the imperial family? Don't forget that I'm not only the eldest daughter of the Prime Minister's residence, but I'm also the 9th Imperial Concubine. Jing Yu, how long are you going to pretend for? Jing Yan's eyes were full of mockery. She said coldly, are you feeling guilty? If you have the ability, then test if you really have abnormal pupils. If you don't, then what are you going to do? Jing Yu abruptly took over after Jing Yan's provocative words. Her voice was full of energy, which shocked everyone. Looking at Jing Yu's confident appearance, she didn't seem like someone who had a guilty conscience. If you don't, Jing Yan's face turned red from holding back her anger. If I don't, then I want you to become a nun. You'll never step into the secular world again. Jing Yu didn't wait for Jing Yin to finish. Her cold words caused Jing Yan's face to suddenly turn pale. Becoming a nun meant that she would never be able to step into the mortal world again. How cruel was this to a woman? What? Are you scared? Then I'll change it. Jing Yu coldly curled her lips and said slowly, you slandered the imperial family and spoke rudely. According to the Tokyo commandments, you should be whipped 50 times and sent to the military camp to serve as a prostitute. Jing Yan's face turned even paler. Jing Yu had made her speechless. How is it? Have you made your choice? Jing Yu crossed her arms and smiled. She looked at Jing Yin with interest. Are you so sure that I'll lose? You have abnormal pupils. You're a monster. Jing Yin shouted crazily, if I lose, I'm willing to become a nun. All right, Jing Yu suddenly shouted. There was a faint smile in her eyes as she said, in front of the emperor and the elders of the sacred clan, I'm afraid you will never be able to take back your words. In that case, what are you waiting for? I'll have to trouble the 2 elders to give me the mirror. Take it. Yin Chen looked at Jing Yu carefully from head to toe and said to the people beside him. The disciple acknowledged and went over. Jing Yu's lips curled into a disdainful smile. With an indifferent expression, she raised her hand and took the mirror. Her expression didn't change at all as she looked at herself in the mirror. The person in the mirror was exquisite and beautiful, with a pair of deep, dark eyes. Xiao Chun, take a look. Do you think my makeup looks good today? Jing Yu looked at herself in the mirror and asked Xiao Chun, who had just stood up. Good. Xiao Chun glanced at Jing Yu in the mirror and nodded. Yin Shan and Ming An's faces darkened when they heard her words. This woman actually thought that the treasure of the Holy Family was an ordinary mirror? Zhu Guang, did you see it clearly? Yin Chen frowned and shouted, 6th Elder, there's no change. The man was slightly stunned and then responded, if there's no change, why are you still standing there? Take the mirror back. Yin Chen's face darkened as he shouted coldly. The man quickly took the mirror from Jing Yu's hand, but he didn't see that when the mirror shone on Jing Yu's neck, the mirror flashed. Jingyu was wearing high-collared clothes today, so the beads on her neck were covered. The place where the light flashed just now was on Jingyu's neck. However, the man called Zhu Guang didn't see it at all because he had been yelled at by Yin Chuan. He hurriedly took the mirror from Jingyu's hand and walked over with his head lowered. Chapter 581. I'm not done yet. Zhu Guang didn't see it, but that didn't mean that Jingyu and Xiao Chen didn't see it. The blinding light shocked Jingyu so much that her heart almost jumped out of her chest. Fortunately, no one saw it. Jingyu raised her voice to hide her panic. Do you really think that this mirror is a toy? Yin Chuan hid the mirror like it was a treasure. When he heard Jingyu's words, his face turned even uglier as he spoke coldly. No. Jingyu smiled faintly and said, So are my eyes different or not? No. Yin Chuan replied snappily. If Elder Yin says so, then it's easy to handle. Jingyu changed the topic and looked at Jing Yin. Jing Yin, now that you've seen and heard it, are you convinced? It looks like you have to go to the nunnery. Don't worry, I'll ask Father to give you more money. It'll be enough for you to eat and wear for the rest of your life. What? How? How can this be? You clearly have different eyes. I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. Jing Yan's face was pale, and her eyes were filled with disbelief. Jing Yan, look at you. Are you pretending to be crazy? Do you think you can invalidate what you've just said? Your Majesty has also seen it. What do you think we should do? Jingyu looked indifferently at Jing Yan. With just a few words, she had described Jing Yan's words as crazy. Clearly, she was telling everyone that her words couldn't be trusted. Enough. Xiao Ye's face turned ugly when he heard this. He coldly said, How can the young miss of the Prime Minister's residence act so crazily? Men, take her away. Take care. I won't send you off. Jingyu was in a good mood as she waved at Jing Yan. She turned to look at everyone and said, Also, I have to say that I can't control wild beasts. I only caught a small snake. Those 2 gray wolves have been with me since I was young. I believe everyone here knows that I grew up in the forest. If I hadn't picked up 2 gray wolves and brought them with me, I might have been eaten by other beasts. Jingyu looked at Yin Chuan and Ming indifferently and said, I'm sorry, but I'm not the person you're looking for. Did you grow up in the forest? Ming An's heart skipped a beat, and he looked at Jingyu with some confusion. Elder Ming, this is something that everyone in the Tokyo Imperial City knows. However, I was separated from my parents when I was young. Fortunately, I have found my home. It is precisely because I drank wolf milk that I have a special affinity with wolves. I believe the 2 elders can understand, right? Jingyu was incomparably calm and spoke without any embellishment. I see. Ming finally understood. He looked at Jingyu with some pity. It was hard to imagine how a child could grow up in such a vicious forest. Since you're not the 9th imperial concubine, then let's continue. Yinshin didn't think much about it and continued to let people test. A good banquet had turned into a foul atmosphere. In the end, no one in the hall was the same. If it wasn't for the fact that the Empress Dowager was too old, Yinshin probably would have let the Empress Dowager test it too. The banquet finally ended after all the tests were completed. Yinshin and Ming didn't gain anything. However, Jing Yin was really taken away because of this matter. The next day, she was escorted out of the imperial city without any preparation and headed to a distant nunnery. It was said that when Mei Jinghe heard the news, she cried until she fainted. She only had one daughter. She had hoped that she could marry the second prince and become a phoenix. She didn't expect such a huge change, and she was actually taken away to become a nun. Chapter 582. After the banquet, Jingyu left the palace in the sedan. It was said that the people from the Holy Family would stay in the palace for a few more days. The emperor arranged for the people from the Holy Family to be received in the embassy. On the way out of the palace, Jingyu didn't say a word to Xiao Chun. In front of the palace gate, they unexpectedly bumped into the people from the Holy Family. They seemed to be discussing something. Jingyu's heart tightened, but she didn't show it on her face. She smiled at Ming and Yin Chun, then turned and got into the carriage. Xiao Qin glanced at Ming An and Yin Chun indifferently, then turned and got into the carriage. That is the famous ninth emperor's, Xiao Chun, right? Ming An frowned and said. Yin Chen narrowed his eyes as he watched Xiao Qin's carriage disappear into the distance. To be able to hear of his name while traveling through the four nations, this person, is not simple. Don't you feel that the ninth imperial concubine is a little different? I don't know why, but I feel that things are not so simple. Mingyan didn't know what he was thinking. Whenever he thought of Jingyu, he couldn't help but feel that things weren't over yet. What? Fifth Elder, are you doubting the relic of the Holy Family? Yin Qin's face turned cold. For so many years, he couldn't stand Mingyan's attitude. It was as if he felt that he was right in front of everything. This feeling made Yin Chen very uncomfortable. That's not it. I'm probably thinking too much. Mingyan shook his head slightly and said, let's go. Yin Chen swung his sleeves and walked forward. Mingyan shook his head helplessly and followed Yin Chen. Yin Chen was famous for his bad temper in the family. Mingyan could only shake his head helplessly. He was still thinking about Jingyu's actions at the banquet today. She seemed to have no flaws, and her expression was very good. But why did he feel that something was wrong? Jingyu and Xiao Qin's carriage traveled a long distance. Jingyu's tense heart finally relaxed a little. She looked sideways at Xiao Qin, her eyes full of fear. If the bead hadn't protected her today, something big would have happened. It's okay. Xiao Qin raised his hand and pulled Jingyu into his arms. He said, even if your different pupils are exposed, this king will definitely protect you. Xiao Qin hugged Jingyu with a little more strength. The heat from Xiao Qin's body warmed Jingyu's heart. Jingyu's slightly panicked heart finally calmed down and became soft. She took a deep breath, buried her head in Xiao Qin's chest, and closed her eyes. After arriving at the palace, Xiao Qin immediately asked people to find out everything about the Holy Family. Jingyu's nerves had been tense for so long, so she lay down to rest after arriving at the palace. Xiao Qin watched Jingyu fall asleep, then went to the study alone to listen to Xingyi's report. In the study, Xiao Qin narrowed his eyes slightly and said coldly, speak. It's all been found. Xingyi took a deep breath and said, the Holy Family first went to Nanli, then to Cebu, and then to the Northern Pastoral. When they arrived at the Northern Pastoral, Master and the Imperial Concubine were both there. There seemed to be traces of the different pupils in the Northern Pastoral. However, Heli and Theo secretly sent people to confuse the Holy Family. Someone secretly spread the news that the different pupils were in the Tokyo, so the Holy Family rushed over. In addition, I also found out that the Poison Sect and Mao Mountain people have also appeared. Shaolin and astrologers have also appeared. Chapter 583. Xiao Qin slowly fell silent. Master, the current situation is most likely very unfavorable for the imperial consort. Xingyi's brows were deeply furrowed as he looked at Xiao Qin and asked, this king knows. Xiao Qin stood up indifferently and said, don't take any action for now. Wait and see. Yes. Xingyi bowed and acknowledged. Xiao Qin turned and returned to the room. Jingyu was sleeping soundly on the bed. Xiao Qin's originally cold gaze slowly softened when he saw Jingyu. He gently took off his outer clothes and climbed onto the bed, carefully holding Jingyu in his arms. The tip of his nose was filled with a familiar scent. Xiao Qin gently kissed the top of Jingyu's head. How could he let anyone hurt the woman he treasured? The night passed silently. The crown princess was already Lu Miaoqiu. This matter was at most a small topic for everyone. A concubine-born woman had such great ability to climb to the position of crown princess. Some people were very disdainful of this, saying that Lu Miaoqiu had used some unknown method. There were also some people who rejoiced in others' misfortune and sighed in relief. They finally didn't have to curry favor with this sickly crown prince. At the same time, some people mocked Lu Miaoqiu. Marrying such a person, who knew if she would become a widow at such a young age. There were many rumors about the crown prince. The matter of the crown prince and crown princess didn't cause much of a stir. After the banquet ended, the biggest thing was the Holy Family that came out of nowhere. Those distant legends were exposed one after another. In an instant, All kinds of rumors spread throughout the Tokyo Imperial City. All kinds of demons and ghosts were mentioned. The storytellers in the tea houses always started with, speaking of which, the Holy Family from 300 years ago. Jingyu was in the Wang Fu. Nuanyu told her about what had happened outside. She furrowed her brows. What was going on? Previously, there was some historical evidence. Now, it had completely fallen into the rhythm of making things up. Jingyu was bored and ate her own food. Xiao Chen stepped into the courtyard and saw Jingyu eating while spacing out. Xiao Chen's eyes were tinged with a faint smile. He slowly walked over. Nuanyu's sharp eyes saw Xiao Chen's figure. She hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings to the 9th Emperors." "And? Xiao Chen, you're here." Jingyu turned her head and blinked. "And?" Xiao Chen nodded and sat. He sat Saturday and looked at Jingyu's mouth. He raised his hand and wiped Jing's mouth. He said, "Qinggu went to the Eastern Palace to treat the Crown Prince's crown prince. He will?" "So fast?" Jingyu was shocked. She sat up straight and asked with a frown, "It's so chaotic outside. Aren't you going to leave after a few more days?" Something happened in Miracle Physician Valley. Qinggu has been delayed for a long time. He can't delay any longer. Xiao Chun frowned slightly and said, "I will secretly mobilize people to protect father-in-law. Nothing will happen." "That's good too. The Imperial City isn't safe now. It's better to let father go to Miracle Physician Valley as soon as possible. Perhaps it will be safer." Jingyu nodded slightly. She stood up and said, "I'm going to the restaurant and shop. I haven't been there for a long time. I wonder how the business is going. And let Xing'er follow you." Xiao Chun stood up and helped Jingyu tidy her hair. "Okay." Jingyu smiled at Xiao Chun. She brought In Xiao and Xing'er out of the Wang Fu and headed to the restaurant and shop. Chapter 584. The Imperial City was as lively as ever. After Jingyu got off the sedan, she brought Xing'er and In Xiao along the main road. Only when they heard the shouts did they feel that the city was much livelier. Jingyu first went to an Ichang court and walked around. Then, she walked all the way down, passing through the dessert shop and heading towards the restaurant. Business is getting better and better. I'm relieved." Jingyu stretched as she walked towards the restaurant. Her eyes were filled with joy. Imperial Concubine is really amazing. Who in the Imperial City doesn't know about these shops? In Xiao looked at Jingyu excitedly and said, "Half of the Imperial City's wealth has been snatched away by Imperial Concubine. You also have the support of the 9th Emperors. Which woman in the Imperial City can compare to Imperial Concubine?" "Little girl, you're just too talkative." Jingyu was very proud. She reprimanded In Xiao and brought Xing'er and In Xiao into the restaurant. "Boss, why are you here today?" Shun Yuqing was talking to the people in the shop. When he turned his head and saw Jingyu, he quickly put down the things he was doing and walked towards Jingyu. In the blink of an eye, Jingyu was already 17 years old. She had been out of the forest for 3 years. Shun Yuqing was the first to follow Jingyu. Now that his business was doing so well, Shun Yuqing was also very magnanimous. However, his attitude towards Jingyu had never changed. He was still close and respectful towards her. When she was just a little girl, he had the same attitude. Now that Jingyu's status was even more noble, Shun Yuqing didn't have the slightest bit of flattery towards her. This made Jingyu feel very relieved. "I'm here to see how the restaurant is doing." Jingyu smiled and asked, "Is there any news from Northern Pastoral?" "Boss, you came at the right time. Northern Pastoral just sent over the accounts and some trivial matters. Does boss want to take a look?" Shun Yuqing nodded and said to Jingyu, "Since we've bumped into each other, let's take a look." Jingyu nodded and went up to the private room on the 2nd floor. She looked at the letter sent from Northern Pastoral. It was nothing more than explaining what Jingyu had done after she left. Lu Man's Rouge Potion was actually the most profitable. Next was Xiao Wensher's Tofu Restaurant, followed by Tang Hongyang's Silk. Such a scene surprised Jingyu. She didn't expect tofu to be so popular. In Northern Pastoral, tofu wasn't even called tofu. Before Jingyu left, she left behind a plan for Xiao Wensher and the others to work on. Xiao Wensher revealed in the letter that he and his brothers wanted to open an escort agency. So he wanted Jingyu to choose a capable person to take over the tofu restaurant. Jingyu read the letter and understood Xiao Wenshi's intentions. She sat down and discussed with Shan Yuqing, asking him to choose 2 capable people to take over the business. The 2 of them talked about the restaurant and other businesses for a while before Shan Yuqing left. Jingyu sat down and drank a big pot of water. It was a waste of saliva to talk so much. Jingyu rested in the private room and didn't see the figures downstairs walk into the restaurant. They were Mengyun, Yinshan, and the other members of the Holy Family. They seemed to be looking for something and then walked into the restaurant to rest. Inside the restaurant, Mengyun, Yinshan, and the others found a seat and sat down. They looked around the restaurant and their eyes were full of surprise. This is the best restaurant in Tokyo, right? What a tacky name. Yinshan frowned and criticized. Chapter 585. Such a dish is worth the price. Mengyun's eyes were full of appreciation. He ate the strange dishes on the table, which were particularly delicious. The disciples of the Holy Family also nodded repeatedly. It was worth it. Yinshan snorted disdainfully, but his hands didn't stop picking up food. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Mengyun leaned back and said with narrowed eyes, "This is the last direction that the high priest pointed out. It's impossible that there aren't any traces of people with different pupils in Dongqing's imperial city. There must be something missing." Fifth Elder, have you forgotten what happened to the last Holy Maiden? Yinshan narrowed his eyes and said, "The Holy Maiden left the Holy Family and was bewitched by a man in the secular world. He defiled the Holy Maiden and gave birth to a person with different pupils. How can we bear such a great shame?" Sixth Elder, have you forgotten the High Priest's words? Mengyun's face changed slightly and he shouted, "The High Priest said that this trip is only to find people with different pupils. We can't attack people in the secular world." High Priest, Fifth Elder, do you still have the King of the Holy Family in your eyes? Yen Chen's eyes were cold. Yen Chen, don't mess around. If you mess up the fate of our family, even the Holy King won't spare you. Mengyun panicked and shouted coldly. The commotion here was so big that it attracted the attention of the surrounding people. Only then did Mengyun feel that his emotions were too agitated. He took a deep breath and slowly sat down. "Although I am the 6th Elder, I don't have to listen to your orders." Yen Chen's face alternated between red and white as he stood up, flicked his sleeves, and left. The 2 sacred race disciples were obviously Yen Chen's confidants. When they saw Yen Chen leave, they hesitated for a moment before hurriedly getting up and bowing to Mengyun before quickly following Yen Chen. Mengyun looked at Yen Chen's leaving figure and sighed deeply. He couldn't understand why the High Priest sent Yen Chen out this time. Now he just hoped to find people with different pupils as soon as possible and bring them back to the Holy Family. He felt uneasy being outside for a long time. Jingyu ate and drank to her heart's content in the restaurant before returning to the prince's mansion. She had no idea that Mengyun and Yin Shun were right below her in the elegant room where she was sitting. Moreover, they might even harm her father. If Jingyu had come downstairs earlier, she would have seen them. But everything was so coincidental. As soon as Mengyun left, Jingyu went downstairs, said goodbye to Shen Yuqing, and went back to the Wang mansion. In the Wang mansion, Xiao Qian and Qinggu were talking in the main hall. When Jingyu stepped in, it was already evening. She walked over when she saw them talking. Xiao Qian and Qinggu heard the sound and looked sideways. When they saw that it was Jingyu, they didn't have much expression. Ninth sister-in-law. Qinggu stood up with a smile and bowed slightly to Jingyu. "Qinggu, when did you come back? How is the crown prince's illness?" Jingyu smiled and looked at Qinggu. "Ninth sister-in-law, you underestimate me too much. It's just a minor illness. Naturally, I can cure it." Qinggu laughed and said, "Ninth brother, ninth sister-in-law, I will leave for Miracle Medical Valley in 2 days. I will go back and pack my luggage. I won't disturb you." "Okay, go ahead." Jingyu nodded and watched Qinggu leave. Then she turned to Xiao Chun and sat down beside Xiao Chen. She said, "The crown prince's illness is cured? What are you going to do next? Help the crown prince ascend the throne? Or pull out Xiao Jingran's wings first?" Chapter 586. You don't have to worry about these things. Xiao Chun replied indifferently. His eyes turned and he said, How was your trip today? Very good. I discussed some things with Shan Yuqing. The northern pastoral business is also developing well. Jingyu propped her head up and told Xiao Chun what they had done today. Xiao Chun listened quietly as usual. Occasionally, he would say a few words to show that he was listening. The night wind was cold. In the dead of night, in the Tokyo Imperial City Embassy, Yin Shan was resting when he suddenly heard the sound of soft footsteps coming from the roof. Yin Shan suddenly opened his eyes and lifted the blanket. He saw the person sitting on a chair not far away. The person who was hiding in the darkness was wearing a black robe. One was sitting and one was standing. Yin Shan couldn't see the person's face, and he couldn't feel any killing intent. Elder Yin, did you sleep well? The person who was sitting down slowly moved her body. An incomparably flirtatious voice sounded out. She obviously didn't want to hide her voice. If Jingyu was here, she would definitely recognize this voice. If it wasn't Nailing You, who else could it be? Who are you? How dare you break into my room? Yin Shan's face turned cold. His eyes flashed with danger as he stared at Nailing You, who was sitting on the chair. Elder Yin, don't be nervous. I just came to bring you some news. Nailing You covered her mouth and laughed. She then said, This news is related to the previous saintess of your saint clan. I heard that the previous saintess had intercourse with a man from the secular world and even gave birth to a child? Yin Shan squinted his eyes. He wanted to see Nailing Yu's face clearly, but he couldn't. He coldly snorted and said, Which clan are you from? Ha ha ha, that's not important. Nailing Yu faintly smiled and said, Now I want to bring you some news. It's about the man who ran away with the previous holy maiden. As long as you find this man, then his daughter will be the next holy maiden. Isn't that right? Why should I believe you? Yin Chun replied with a sneer. Believe it or not, it's up to you. Nailing Yu smiled casually and raised his hand slightly. The shadow standing beside him moved and threw a scroll-like thing in his hand towards Yin Shan. Yin Shan raised his hand and caught it. With a heart full of suspicion, he slowly opened the scroll. On the white scroll, a woman as beautiful as a flower was reflected in Yin Chen's eyes. Yin Chen's eyes suddenly widened. The beautiful face of the woman in the scroll was so familiar. At that moment, he seemed to have returned to the days when he was in the Holy Family and lived a carefree life with his beloved in the Holy Family. Chi Yun, Sister Yun. Yin Chen's eyes flashed with complicated emotions. In the end, he suddenly closed the scroll and stared at Nailing You. In a cold voice he said, Where is that man? It's said that 2 days later, someone from the Godly Physician Valley will bring a man to the Godly Physician Valley. The road to take is in the west of the city. I stole this painting from this person's residence. Nailing You slowly stood up. The corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile and said, I believe that when you see this person, you will know who he is. That's right, Elder Yin, don't be rash. This person's identity is not ordinary. Nailing You chuckled and threw down these words. His figure jumped up onto the windowsill and quickly left. The black-clothed man followed closely behind him. In the dark night, he came and went as freely as a ghost. Chapter 587. His identity is not ordinary? Yin Chen's eyes were filled with brutality. If this damned man hadn't taken Chi Yun away, he would have had the chance to sit on the high priest's seat. As long as he married the holy maiden, she would be the purest woman in his heart. However, she had been defiled by a man from the secular world. How could he tolerate such humiliation? Yin Chen suddenly stood up. His eyes were filled with brutal, murderous intent. He silently walked out of the room. After a while, he found his 2 trusted subordinates. In the dim room, the 3 of them sat opposite each other. Yin Shan slowly placed the picture scroll on the table and unfolded it. The murderer who defiled and killed the holy maiden has been found. Yin Shan said coldly, In 2 days, this evil man will escape to the Miracle Medical Valley. This time, we must fulfill the decree of the king of the Holy Family. We must kill this evil man and use his blood to wash away the shame of our holy family." Yes, the two disciples' hearts were burning. Their eyes were filled with righteousness as they responded in a deep voice. "Go and hire assassins to set up an ambush 10 miles west of the city. This time, we must not let this evil man escape." Yin Chen's eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty light. He said coldly, "The fifth elder has worked hard to find the man with the strange pupils. There is no need to inform him of this matter. With this elder personally taking action, this evil man will not be able to escape." Yes, the two disciples were slightly surprised. They had long known that the two elders were not on good terms. Now that they heard this, their hearts paused for a moment. However, they still bowed to show their approval. The candles in the room were burning. No one knew that a shocking assassination was about to happen. No one would have thought that the sixth elder from the Holy Family was the man who had once admired the Holy Maiden. Many years had passed. No one knew whether it was because of unwillingness or resentment that had accumulated over time. Today, it was the best time to vent his anger. "Master, it's all done." In a dark cellar, Nailin Yu unbuckled her belt and asked faintly, "Have the people of the poison sect come?" "This subordinate has already sent a message." The shadow kneeling on the ground bowed and responded, "Very good. Let's wait for a good show." Nailin Yu casually took off her black clothes and put on a transparent inner garment. She raised her hand and took a wine cup. Looking at the green ripples in the wine cup, she said faintly, "Jing Yu, this time, I want to see how long you can hide your strange pupils." Ha ha ha. Cold laughter filled with killing intent echoed in the cellar. Nailin Yu raised her hand and drank the wine in her hand. She raised her head and exhaled a faint green chi. It was very strange. The days in the manor grew more and more leisurely. In the blink of an eye, it was time for Qinggu to leave. It was also time for Jingyu to go to Godly Physician Valley for treatment. Early in the morning, Jingyu got up and went to the Prime Minister's manor. Xiaoqun naturally went with her. She watched Jing Zhan get into the carriage and accompany him out of the city gates. Only then did she reluctantly stop in her tracks. At the city gate, Jingyu watched as Jing Zhan was helped into the carriage. She felt a little sour in her heart. Jing Zhan looked at Jing Yu's worried look and raised his hand to touch her head. He said, "It's a good thing that father is going to Miracle Medical Valley to treat his illness. You don't have to worry about father." "Father?" Jing Yu cried out in grievance. The moment she stared at Jing Zhan, her heart couldn't help but throb with pain. She seemed to feel a little flustered, but it disappeared too quickly. Jing Yu couldn't tell what it was. Chapter 588. You are in the most danger right now. Jing Zhan held Jing Yu's hand tightly and said solemnly, "Remember what father said to you?" "Yes, I know." Jing Yu nodded in response. "Ninth sister-in-law, it's time to go." Qinggu walked over and said, "If we delay for too long, we will have to sleep on the mountain before sunset." "I know. Don't rush me." Jing Yu glared at Qinggu with hidden bitterness, but she had no choice but to let go. She watched with eyes full of worry as the curtain of the carriage was lowered. Qinggu laughed a few times and bid farewell to everyone. Only then did he get on the horse and bring the palanquin, as well as some herbs and books, out of the city. Jingyu stood in place and watched as Jing Zhan boarded the carriage that gradually disappeared into the distance. In that instant, she felt as if something had been dug out of her heart. It made Jingyu so uncomfortable. She laughed self-deprecatingly in her heart. This was what it meant to be human. He was her only father in her previous life and in this life. How could she give up on him after having him? Father. What a distant, yet warm word. It's time to go back. Xiaoqun slowly walked forward and put his arm around Jingyu's shoulder. Only then did Jingyu gather her thoughts and respond. She followed Xiaoqun and left. With Xiaoqun secretly protecting them, nothing would happen. Jingyu thought this, and her slightly uneasy heart slowly calmed down. In the prince's manor, Jingyu propped up her chin and was reading a book in her hand. Xiaoqun said that he had to go to the palace for business. Jingyu was very bored in the manor. Just as she was engrossed in reading, She heard Nuan Yu report that Miss Shangguan from the general's manor had come to visit. Jing Yu was delighted. What she wanted had come. She just felt that she had some free time and a companion came. Jing Yu. Shangguan Linglan strode into the room. When he saw Jing Yu sitting comfortably on the couch, he glared at her and grimaced. Why are you so relaxed all day? Your little face is so meaty. What do you know? This is the beauty of fullness. Jing Yu unceremoniously slapped away Shangguan Linglan's hand that was about to pinch her face. She asked, Why did you come looking for me today? Sigh. Don't mention it. Shangguan Linglan sighed deeply and said, My father and a few of my brothers have all gone to the military camp and are busy with their own things. No one has been paying attention to me these few days. It's been very boring in the manor. I heard that your father is going to Miracle Physician Valley today. I wanted to send him off, but I was told that he had already left. That's why I came over. Yes, my father left for Miracle Physician Valley early in the morning. Jing Yu nodded. She looked at Shangguan Linglan and said, It's rare for you to be so free. Why do I feel that you're so unhappy? I don't know. Shangguan Linglan was speechless. He frowned and leaned on the table, eating Jing Yu's snacks. He said, It's really boring. Miao Qiu has been in the palace all this time. It's very troublesome to even see her. Fortunately, I can still find you. I think you're thinking about something. Jing Yu covered her mouth and smiled. Tell me, have you taken a fancy to any young master recently? This imperial concubine doesn't mind being a matchmaker for you. Go away. What nonsense are you talking about? Shangguan Linglan glared and pushed away Jing Yu. Jing Yu didn't let him go and kept saying flirtatious words, making Shangguan Linglan cry out. It was very lively to have a companion in the manor. Chapter 589. Jing Yu and Shangguan Linglan fooled around for an entire afternoon. In the evening, Jing Yu changed into a new set of clothes, saying that she wanted to bring Shangguan Linglan to see if there were any bird nests on the trees in this Wangfu. Perhaps there would be some gains. When Shangguan Linglan heard this, she immediately became interested and pulled Jing Yu to climb the tree. Nuan Yu and Yin Xiao looked at these two young ladies with black lines on their heads. They were both young ladies of noble families. Why didn't they learn good things and want to learn how to climb trees? Jing Yu and Shangguan Linglan were having fun. Just as they were talking and laughing, they suddenly saw Xing Er flying over from afar with a gloomy expression. It was such a short distance, but Xing Er didn't walk or run. He actually flew over. What exactly happened to make Xing Yi so anxious? Imperial Consort. Xing Er suddenly stopped in front of Jing Yu with a turn. What is it? Jing Yu's heart trembled slightly. She blinked and asked in confusion. Something happened. Xing Er panted slightly and quickly said, Something happened to old Master Jing Tinli west of the city. Master is already rushing over. Imperial Consort. Jing Yu's mind was in a mess. At that moment, it was as though something was rapidly leaving her. Xing Er's words suddenly stopped. Jing Yu took a deep breath. Her expression was so calm that no changes could be seen. She rushed forward and grabbed Xing Er, saying, Quickly bring me there. Master said. Xing Er wanted to repeat Xiao Chen's words, but when he raised his eyes and saw Jing Yu's eyes, Xing Er actually couldn't say anything. His brows furrowed slightly, and after a moment of silence, he said, Imperial Consort, sorry to offend you. After speaking, Xing Er walked forward and grabbed Jing Yu's waist, quickly bringing Jing Yu to the gate of the Wangfu. Shangguan Linglan stood in place with shock. Seeing Jing Yu fly far away, he suddenly stomped his foot and said, This is bad. Something's going to happen. Shangguan Linglan hurriedly ran towards the gate of the Wangfu. At the gate, Xing Er put Jing Yu down. Jing Yu impatiently flipped onto the back of the horse, pulling on the reins, and quickly galloped towards the west of the city. Xing Er followed closely behind. When Shangguan Linglan came out, there was no one at the gate. He originally wanted to chase after them, but his eyes turned, and he returned to the general's residence first. On the streets, Jing Yu's horse was very anxious. Her mind had never been so clear. The news that Jing Zhan was going to Miracle Medical Valley for treatment was not known to everyone, but it was not deliberately hidden. In the imperial city, who was it that wanted to make a move on Jingzhan? Jia. Jing Yu's eyes were full of coldness. She forcefully cracked the whip in her hand, and the horse rushed through the busy streets. Jing Yu could no longer hear the clamor and curses. She only had one thought in her mind. Nothing must happen to her father. After being reborn, she purposely made herself forget everything from her previous life. She only wanted to live a peaceful life in this life and do what she wanted to do. Her father was the most precious thing she had in this life. Jing Yu held the reins tightly in her hand. The imperial city was in a mess. At this moment, there was a commotion in the embassy. What did you say? Sixth elder went to kill the person who defiled the previous holy maiden? When did this happen? Mengen's eyes were full of panic. His face turned pale in an instant. He suddenly stood up and stared at a disciple of the Holy Family in front of him and shouted. Chapter 590. Yes, this disciple also just received the news. 2 days ago, the sixth elder actually hired countless assassins to go to the west of the city to kill that evil man. The holy race disciple said in a serious manner. Nonsense. This is too much. Mengen paced around anxiously. He suddenly raised his head and said, Quick, prepare the horses to stop the sixth elder. We can't let him make a mistake. Yes. Several horses from the embassy chased after Jing Yu's footsteps as they flew through the busy city. Such a large commotion directly alerted the city guards in the imperial city. However, at this moment, news came from the general's residence. The city guards could not be allowed to make any movements. Jing Yu's horse rushed out of the city gates without any obstructions and sped towards the west of the city. On a mountain in the west of the city was the resting place of the 2 gray wolves, Yin Jian and Yin Feng. Jing Yu raised her hand and whistled when she passed by. A hurried and sharp whistle rang out in the forest. Jing Yu pulled on the reins with one hand and continued forward, putting the other to her lips and whistling. Interrogation Officer 1, who was following behind Jing Yu, heard everything clearly. For a moment, he actually felt a little dazed, as if he had returned to the Roman forest 3 years ago. The petite woman was fighting alongside the wolves, slaughtering their way through the battle. After staying in the imperial city for so long, Xing Er had forgotten about this imperial concubine and her terrifying methods. He really thought that the 2 gray wolves wouldn't bite and were just 2 pets. This 9th imperial concubine was really a woman who focused on business. He really felt that this matter was too distant. The woman who had shocked him countless times back then seemed to have changed at this moment. Oh, whoa. Wolf howls sounded one after another. Jing Yu's expression became colder and colder. The horse seemed to feel a strong sense of uneasiness. The closer it got, the more it could smell the heavy atmosphere in the air. Jing Yu whipped the horse fiercely. The horse shot through the forest like an arrow. At the turn, there were corpses and blood stains. Jing Yu's heart suddenly tightened. Father, nothing must happen to you. Avenge the Holy Family and kill the evil man. When Jing Yu turned the corner, the first thing she heard was this shout. She suddenly reined in the horse. The moment she looked up, she saw blood everywhere. Jing Yu was lying on the ground, covered in dirt. Because his legs couldn't move, he was lying on the ground stiffly. The person who spoke was Yin Qian. He was holding a snow-white broadsword in his hand and wearing a gray shirt. On the other side of the battlefield, Xiao Qian and Xing Yi were both held back by 2 disciples of the Holy Family and countless men in black. They wanted to come over, but they couldn't. Stop! Jing Yu's eyes suddenly widened. She shouted hysterically. Her eyes were bloodshot as she looked at the broadsword that was about to fall. Silver arrow. At that moment, Jing Yu had never felt so panicked before. A huge gray wolf flew out from the forest. At that moment, it was as if time had stopped. All the sounds in the surroundings ceased to exist. Jing Yu's eyes stared at the falling broadsword and the gray wolf that was pouncing towards Yin Chun from the forest. No! Roar! The broadsword in Yin Chen's hand mercilessly chopped towards Jing Zhan's neck. But at the moment when it was about to fall, he had to dodge and fly past Jing Zhan. Chapter 591. However, he was too slow and his back was scratched by the sharp claws of the silver arrow. Father! Jing Yu's entire body went limp. In the end, the broadsword didn't cut Jing Zhan's neck. Jing Yu darted to Jing Zhan's side. Her heart pounded violently as she knelt beside Jing Zhan. The man lying on the ground struggled to open his eyes and look at Jing Yu. Father! Father! Jing Yu's fingertips trembled. She did not dare to touch Jing Zhan. Jing Zhan turned to look at Jing Yu, and a faint smile appeared in his eyes. He opened his mouth and said, "You are... Father, I'm afraid. I have to see your mother." No. Don't. Jing Yu stared in horror at Jing Zhan's neck, which was originally fine, as a thin line of blood slowly appeared. Under Jing Yu's horrified gaze, the line of blood became deeper and deeper. Dark red blood gushed out from Jing Zhan's neck. No. Don't. Father. Father. Jing Yu screamed at the top of her lungs. A group of people slowly approached from afar. The person who came was naturally Meng. When he saw such a scene, his heart skipped a beat. He felt that something terrible was about to happen. Imperial concubine. Xing Er looked in shock at Jing Yu, who was kneeling beside Jing Zhan. His heart trembled slightly. It's you. You are his daughter. You are the daughter of the Holy Maiden. Yin Shan stared intently at Jing Yu. There was a fiery look in his eyes. Mengen's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. His gaze was somewhat uncertain as he looked at the woman kneeling silently on the ground. He actually felt a little uneasy in his heart. Why? Jing Yu's body finally moved. Little by little, she was incomparably stiff. Countless storms were brewing in Jing Yu's pitch-black eyes. Something that had been dormant in her heart was slowly awakening. Her pitch-black eyes were filled with unwillingness. In the distance, Xiao Qian and Xing Yi broke away from the battle. Everyone's gaze was focused on Jing Yu. At this moment, the sky and earth changed. The night wind blew. Why? Why did you kill my only father? Jing Yu raised her head and stared straight at Yin Chun as she asked. I don't ask for anything. I don't want anything. I just want a peaceful life. Is it so difficult? Jing Yu's eyes were trembling. Her tightly clenched fists seemed to be suppressing something. In the distance, Jing Lang, who was injured and unconscious, slowly woke up. The scene in front of him made him feel suffocated. Why did you do this to me? Why did you take my only family? Why? So what if they were from the sacred race? I have never been your enemy. I have never wanted to be your enemy. Why did you refuse to let us go? You forced my mother to her death, and then you killed my father. Why? You were... Jing Lang's eyes were filled with shock as he looked at Jing Yu, who had fallen into a state of tyranny. The cold bloodlust in her eyes was something he had never seen before. Tell me, why is that? Jing Yu shouted angrily. Under everyone's horrified gazes, Jing Yu's suppressed rage seemed to have finally found an outlet. In Jing Yu's heart, an incomparably dense hatred brewed. Jing Yu slowly stood up. Her petite body looked like it would fall in the night wind. Chapter 592. However, there seemed to be a powerful aura brewing in her body. With Jing Yu's words, the bead on Jing Yu's neck started to heat up and cracks appeared on it. Just because I'm the son of the Holy Maiden? Just because of that bullshit pupils? Just because of a pair of eyes? Jing Yu suddenly raised her head and laughed loudly. Ha ha ha. Whether I'm a good person or a bad person, it all depends on what your holy family says. Ha 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 ha. That's ridiculous. You. Yin Chen's face changed and his eyes were filled with fear. Kacha. A slight sound came from Jing Yu's neck. On the bed, the jade bead on Jing Yu's neck broke inch by inch, and the string broke and slipped down. Mengen and Yin Chun saw this scene with their own eyes and finally understood why Jing Yu didn't show any abnormal pupils when she looked in the mirror. Holy bead. Yin Chen's eyes flashed with surprise and he said coldly, You really do have abnormal pupils. You actually have the holy bead to avoid the detection of the holy mirror. So what if I do? Jing Yu's eyes suddenly shot out a strong murderous intent. She stared coldly at Yin Chun and said, "Aren't you looking for this pair of eyes? Now that you've found it, what do you want? Do you want to kill me? Kill my father and then kill me?" "Miss, please don't be agitated. I'm the fifth elder of the Holy Family. This time, I came out of the mountain to bring the Holy Maiden's orphan back to the Holy Family. I have no other intentions." Mengan quickly stepped out and said loudly, "Ha ha ha, no other intentions." Jingyu shouted loudly, "Then tell me, why are there corpses lying here? Isn't the person who just killed my father a member of your Holy Family? Ha ha ha, what bullshit Holy Family? You can't even distinguish right from wrong. Useless clan. Ha ha ha, how dare you? How dare you insult my Holy Family?" Yin Shan heard Jingyu's words, and his face suddenly became cold and he shouted loudly, "Silver Arrow, bite him to death." Jingyu's eyes suddenly turned cold. She raised her hand and gave the order without mercy. The silver arrow suddenly jumped up like a gust of wind and flew towards Yin Chun. Yin Chin's face changed and he shouted angrily, "Damn beast!" "Oh!" Yin Feng took a step forward, then immediately leaped up and pounced towards Yin Chun. Two huge gray wolves opened their bloody mouths and bit towards Yin Chun. Mengan's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly opened his mouth and said, "Miss, please stop." Jingyu acted as if she didn't hear anything. She let the silver arrow and the silver wind tear Yin Chen's robe. Mengan's face changed and he quickly rushed over. The members of the Holy Family raised their weapons and charged toward Yin Jian and Yin Feng. Jingyu's eyes were cold as she raised her hand to summon the two wolves back. "You killing people is called eliminating evil. If I kill people, I become an evil person. Ha ha ha, that's great." Jingyu slowly squatted down and stroked the heads of the two gray wolves, Yin Jian and Yin Feng. She stood up and walked towards Jing Zhan's corpse. Looking at the corpse that was gradually cooling down, Jingyu felt a suffocating pain in her heart. "Miss, please come back to the Holy Family with us." Mengan looked at the situation in front of him and thought that he had to bring Jingyu back no matter what. Otherwise, the world would be in chaos. "Who do you think you are? What right do you have to ask me?" Jingyu suddenly turned her head. Her dark eyes were moving. Mengan and Yin Chun were stunned as they watched Jingyu's dark eyes slowly change from black to two different colors. One was gold and the other was green, so dazzling. Chapter 593. Dual-colored pupils. Yin Shan and Mengan were completely frightened. Looking at Jingyu's dual-colored eyes, their eyes were full of shock, and they couldn't calm down for a long time. "Oh, you saw it?" Jingyu raised her hand and pressed it against the corners of her eyes. She blinked slowly, and her eyes were filled with cold light. She stared at Mengan and Yin Chun and said, "So what if I saw it? I was too stupid. Why did I have to cover my eyes so hard? So what if you don't have black eyes? So what if you have dual-colored pupils?" Ha ha ha. Jingyu laughed presumptuously. At that moment, she seemed to despise and disdain everyone in the world. Her heart was beating rapidly. Why did she have to hide so sullenly? She should have been arrogant all her life. In her previous life, she wasn't herself. Everything she did was for the sake of the country. Agents were just tools to kill people. She hid all her temperament. In this life, she was carefree and always wanted to avoid everything. If she didn't shrink back again and again, how could it be like this? Kill when you need to. Do what you need to do. This was the feeling she liked the most. She didn't have to worry about anything. She should be arrogant. Do you want to kill me?" Jingyu looked at Meng and Yinshin indifferently and shouted coldly, "This king wants to see who dares to do this in this Tokyo's territory." Before Yinshan and Mengan could react, they heard a muffled shout from not far away. Xiao Chen's robe was stained with blood. He held a long sword tightly in his hand and walked silently toward Jingyu. He stood naturally beside Jingyu. "My woman is Xiao Chen's woman. You have no right to bully her." Xiao Chen suddenly raised the sword in his hand and pointed it directly at Yin Shan and Mengan's lives. His eyes were cold, and his powerful aura was comparable to Jingyu's dual-colored pupils. "This king will take your life today." Xiao Chen's expression did not change from the beginning to the end. His cold words carried the power to control the life and death of the world. Yin Qin's body stiffened. He looked at the tip of Xiao Qin's sword pointing at him. At that moment, he felt extremely frightened. You. Yin Qin opened his mouth to speak, but found that he couldn't speak at this moment. Mingyan looked at the sudden change in the scene in front of him and felt his temples throbbing. The high priest was right. This trip might bring the Holy Family tens of thousands of years of stability, but it might also bring them destruction. How could this be? A few days ago, his divination should not have been like this. Why would there be such a drastic change in a single day? The biggest variable was Yin Qin. Yin Qin was also a member of the Holy Family. Mengyan could not divine Yin Qin, so he neglected such an important factor. Mengyan's heart was full of regret. He looked up at the two people standing not far away. The man was dressed in black and exuded a strong, cold, and arrogant aura. His sharp aura could almost split the sky and the earth. The woman beside him had a pair of dazzling dual-colored eyes. She seemed to be arrogant and murderous. She did not put anyone in her eyes. Such a perfect match that could be called a death god walked together. Mengyan Xian was fiercely shaken. It seemed that the world was just as the high priest had said. The stars would change in the blink of an eye, and surviving in the cracks of destruction might be the only way out for the saints. Now, he only hoped that the person with the dual-colored pupils had not lost his last existence for the people of the Holy Family. Chapter 594. There was the sound of a horse reining in. While everyone was silent, the sound of countless horse hooves suddenly sounded from the main road. The sound of uniform footsteps sounded from the horse hooves. Everyone turned their heads to look. In front of the thousands of soldiers and horses, a woman wearing iron armor and holding a spear was riding a horse towards Jingyu with an anxious expression on her face. Surround her. That familiar face and a body that was as firm as a javelin. She was clearly a woman, but at this moment, she was so tall and powerful. Shangguan Linglan waved the spear in her hand and ordered coldly. Behind her, countless guards with bows and arrows, large swords and shields surrounded everyone on the main road. In my Tokyo country, a member of the Holy Family actually dared to bribe an assassin to kill my Tokyo minister. According to my Tokyo laws, you should be beheaded. Shangguan Linglan pointed the spear in her hand at Yin Qin. Under her voice, there was an endless amount of pressure. She actually silently carried the killing intent and the aura of a general on the battlefield. Mengyan suddenly widened her eyes and stared at Shangguan Linglan. Her heart was beating slightly. She never thought that this woman would be a natural commander. Why didn't she notice it before? Yes, who would pay attention to such a weak woman? Wait, Mengyan hurriedly said. Now that the Tokyo army had been mobilized for this matter, it would definitely not end well. Shangguan Linglan had just said that the person Yin Chen killed was a high-ranking official of the Tokyo Imperial Court. He was also the father of the 9th Imperial Concubine and the father-in-law of the 9th Emperors. It was impossible to hide such an important matter. Young General, this matter is a misunderstanding, Mengyan hurriedly said. Misunderstanding? This king saw it with his own eyes. What misunderstanding could there be? Xiao Qian smiled coldly and walked towards Yin Chen step by step. His eyes were filled with killing intent. You can't kill me. I am an elder of the Holy Family. If you kill me, the members of the Holy Family will never let you go. Yin Chen said as he stepped back. Mengyan's expression changed when he heard this. He cursed Yin Chen in his heart. At this moment, Yin Chen actually used the Holy Family as a shield. He was forcing the Tokyo and the Holy Family to go against each other. Shouldn't they make peace in such a situation? However, from the looks of it, there was no way for them to make peace. Mengyan tilted his head slightly. If killing one person could ensure the safety of the Holy Family, then so be it. Mengyan, you old bastard, save me. Just when Mengyan was hesitating whether he should immediately rescue and retreat or not, he suddenly heard Yin Chen shout. His face immediately turned cold. He snorted coldly and turned his head without speaking. Holy Family? So what? If he dares to come, this king dares to destroy him. The strong arrogance in Xiao Qin's eyes made people's hearts palpitate. At this moment, Jingyu, who was standing silently on the side, moved. Xiao Qun, don't let him die. Jingyu's strange eyes flashed as she said, today's enmity is a debt of the past. One day, I will personally go to the sacred race to get my revenge. Jingyu turned around indifferently and squatted down. She gently helped Jingzhan up and said faintly, Father, I will take you home. Hearing this, Xiao Qin glanced sideways at Yin Chun. In front of everyone, he spun the sword in his hand, causing blood to splatter everywhere. After the blood splattered, an earth-shattering wail rang out. Xiao Chun indifferently withdrew his sword and turned to leave. Behind Xiao Chun, all the meridians in Yin Chen's limbs were cut. At this moment, he fell to the ground with blood all over his body and screamed in pain. Mingyan saw this scene and frowned slightly. He looked at Xiao Qin's back with some fear in his heart. Chapter 595. Take this trash and leave. Xiao Qin's cold voice sounded. Mingyan looked around and secretly stomped his foot. He lifted Yin Chen up and covered his mouth before quickly flying away. Jing Lang stood up with his hand on his shoulder. His bleeding shoulder was clearly pierced through. On the other side, Qinggu was still unconscious and did not know anything about what had happened. Those who deserved to die were all dead. Those who left had also left. Jingyu knelt on the ground and supported Jing Zhan's body. Her expression was a little stupefied. Xiao Qin squatted in front of Jingyu and raised his hand to touch Jingyu's face. Jingyu's eyes turned and looked at Xiao Qun. Bring father home. This time, Xiao Qun did not call him father-in-law. Instead, he called him father. Jingyu's nose twitched and her eyes turned misty. Okay. Jingyu nodded and watched as Xiao Qin waved for Xing Yi and Xing Er to carry Jing Zhan onto the carriage. Then, he helped Qinggu and Jing Lang onto the carriage. Shangguan Linglan directed the soldiers to clean up the battlefield. Then, he turned and walked towards Jingyu. Jingyu. Shangguan Linglan looked at Jingyu with a complicated gaze. The words of comfort that came to his mouth could not come out. Linglan, thank you. Jingyu's eyes did not turn black. Instead, they carried a strange color. Jingyu raised her hand to touch the corners of her eyes and said, I've caused you trouble. Today, you should report to the emperor as it is. Jingyu, what nonsense are you saying? Shangguan Linglan was silent for a moment. Then, he stepped forward and hugged Jingyu in his arms. He said in a deep voice, I don't care what others think of you. Whether you're a demon or a monster, in my eyes, you're my family. I won't let anyone bully you. PFFF. Jingyu felt warmth in her heart, but she couldn't help but feel a little sour. She looked at Shangguan Linglan's military uniform and said, You didn't steal this uniform, did you? Sure. Shangguan Linglan was slightly stunned when he heard this. Then, he made a shushing gesture and said, Keep your voice down. I stole the commander's seal. Otherwise, how do you think I have the ability to mobilize my personal guards? Jingyu was speechless as she stared at Shangguan Linglan. Only this girl would do such a thing. Don't worry. I've done this kind of thing many times. At most, I'll get a beating when I go back. Shangguan Linglan shrugged nonchalantly and said, Get on the carriage. I'll escort you back to the prince's residence. Okay. Jingyu opened her mouth to thank him, but in the end, she didn't say anything. She bent her eyebrows and nodded as she watched Shangguan Linglan order the soldiers to do what he wanted them to do. Xiao Qun, what will happen to Linglan if she does this? Jingyu looked up at Xiao Qun and asked. Xiao Qun retracted his gaze and put his arm around Jingyu's waist. He helped Jingyu onto the carriage and said, With me around, nothing will happen. Don't worry. Okay. Jingyu nodded and obediently got on the carriage. In the carriage, Jingyu saw Jing Lang holding his head and staring at Jing Zhan's corpse. This scene made Jingyu tremble slightly. Big brother. Jingyu called out. You were. Jing Lang raised his head. Although there wasn't any grief on his face, the pain in his eyes couldn't be hidden. Jingyu paused and leaned into Jing Lang's arms. She hugged him tightly without saying a word. Chapter 596. Jing Lang's body stiffened slightly. He paused and hugged Jing Yu. Feeling Jing Yu's trembling body, Jing Lang could not bear the pain in his heart. His eyes were slightly red. He hugged Jing Yu tightly and did not speak. The atmosphere in the carriage was so silent that it was suffocating. Xiao Chun raised his head slightly and glanced at the two before leaving the carriage. He sat in the driver's seat and remained silent. Big brother, I want to cremate father's body and bring it to the Roman forest for burial. Let's move mother's grave to the forest as well. Jing Yu wiped her eyes and raised her head to look at Jing Lang. Okay. Jing Yu slowly nodded in agreement. Jing Yu tilted her head to look at Jing Zhan's pale face and said faintly, the imperial city is not suitable for father and mother. The forest is vast and boundless. Let's bury father and mother at the place where I used to live. There will be many friends there to accompany father and mother. After I get my revenge, I will return to the forest to accompany father and mother. Okay, big brother will accompany you. Jing Lang raised his hand to pat Jing Yu's head and said, this return to the city was grand. Shangguan Linglan took the lead and escorted the group back to the Wang Manor. The people on the streets all stepped back and looked at this scene with confusion. They didn't know what had happened today. After arriving at the prince's residence, the army immediately formed a circle. Interrogation Unit 1 and Interrogation Unit 2 went forward to carry Jing Lang out of the carriage. Qing Ge and Jing Lang were also lowered down, and they quickly went to find a doctor to check on them. Only then did they know that Qing Gu had hit the back of his head and had fallen into a coma. Jing Lang's injury was serious, and he might not be able to use his right hand for the rest of his life. This news was undoubtedly a blow to Jing Lang. He was a general, and his right hand held a sword to protect his family. Now that he couldn't use his right hand, how could he do it? Big brother, when Qing Gu wakes up, he might be able to treat it. Jing Yu looked at Jing Lang and clenched his left hand slightly. She said, even without your right hand, you still have your left hand. How long did Big Brother take to practice the sword? If you can do it with your right hand, it doesn't mean you can't do it with your left hand. You are. Jing Lang's heart trembled as he looked up at Jing Yu with a complicated gaze. Big brother, Yuer will not give up on you. Jing Yu took a deep breath and said, in this world, Yuer only has Big Brother. Big Brother definitely won't give up on Yuer, right?
Yes.
Jing Lang's heart felt as if it had been struck by a huge rock. He took a deep breath and looked at Jing Yu. Big brother will not give up on Yuer. That's good. When Jing Yu heard Jing Lang's promise, the corners of her mouth curled into a happy smile. She was like a child who had received candy. Her smile was so happy and comfortable. The events of this day soon reached Xiao Chen's ears. An urgent edict had been sent to summon Xiao Chun and Jing Yu into the palace. When Xiao Chen heard it indifferently, he indifferently ordered people to chase the person who sent the edict out. Jing Yu was puzzled by his actions. Since I am a rebellious official, I naturally have to act like one. Xiao Chen sensed Jing Yu's confusion. He held Jing Yu's shoulder and said, from now on, I will accompany you in whatever you want to do. If you kill people, I will set fires. If you save people, I will heal them. Who dares to say no? Xiao Chun. Jing Yu's heart trembled. Looking at Xiao Chen's incomparably serious expression, the corners of her mouth curled into a faint smile. You are a rebellious official, and I am an evildoer. This world cannot tolerate us, so why should we tolerate the people of the world? Jing Yu slowly smiled. She leaned over Xiao Chen's heart and said, Xiao Chun, fortunately, I still have you. Chapter 597. Xiao Chen didn't say anything. He just hugged Jing Yu tightly. The general's mansion was in chaos. Shangguan Linglan had mobilized his personal guards. Xiao Yi couldn't summon Xiao Qian into the palace, so he immediately sent an edict to the general's mansion. Shangguan Hongwan had just returned from the army camp, but he didn't expect such a big change to happen in the general's mansion. Inside the general's mansion, Shangguan Linglan was still wearing his armor. He was kneeling on the ground and refused to say a word. He let his brothers worry about him. Shangguan Hongwan's roars were like wind in his ears. Lan Er, if you admit your mistake, father won't blame you. Shangguan Hongwen stared at Shangguan Linglan for a long time, then took a deep breath and said, "Father, I didn't do anything wrong." Shangguan Linglan finally raised her head. She looked at Shangguan Hongwan with burning eyes and said, "I didn't practice martial arts for myself. I did it to protect the people I want to protect. Today's matter is all my fault. If father wants to punish me, punish me." "You." Shangguan Hongwan was furious. He looked coldly at Shangguan Linglan and said, "Do you know that your one mistake has made the general's mansion an accomplice of a rebellious minister?" "Who is a rebellious minister?" "If father is talking about the ninth emperors, then I can only say that father has forgotten your original intention of becoming a general." Shangguan Linglan looked up at Shangguan Hongwan and said, "As a general, I must be loyal to a wise ruler." "Father, can you really tell yourself that you are loyal to a wise ruler?" Shangguan Linglan's words were extremely sharp, causing Shangguan Hongwen's expression to change. Under the gaze of Shangguan Linglan's clear eyes, he actually felt a sense of guilt. Is the current emperor really a wise ruler that you wholeheartedly want to support? Shangguan Linglan opened her mouth again and said, "Father, if the ninth emperor is a rebellious minister, then I am willing to serve him as king and establish a new country." When Shangguan Linglan's words fell, the hall was dead silent. At this moment, everyone's eyes fell on Shangguan Linglan. The group of brothers lowered their heads. Shangguan Hongwen quietly looked at Shangguan Linglan, who was kneeling on the ground with a straight back. That arrogance, that pair of resolute eyes, and sharp words. Shangguan Hongwen looked at Shangguan Linglan for a long time. Then he suddenly laughed and slapped the table. "Good. You are worthy of being a member of the Shangguan family." Shangguan Hongwen's body was like a mountain. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "These brats are not talented generals. They can only walk the path of ordinary people. Lan'er, you are different. You have the heart of a strong person. In the future, your achievements will not be below father's." "Father." Shangguan Linglan stared blankly at her father. At this moment, an indescribable feeling brewed in her heart. Father is old. Do what you want to do. Shangguan Hongwan stepped forward and helped Shangguan Linglan up. He looked at Shangguan Linglan's petite body and said, "Father doesn't want to put this burden on your shoulders. But now it seems that even if I don't do this, you won't let it go. Don't worry. Even if the sky falls, father will still be here. Father only has one precious daughter. Even the rebellious ministers can't compare to the happiness of my daughter." Shangguan Hongwan placed his hand on Shangguan Linglan's shoulder. Shangguan Linglan's heart trembled. She looked at Shangguan Hongwan, and her eyes turned red. Chapter 598. In all these years, these were probably the best words she had heard from her father. In Shangguan Linglan's eyes, her father was like a tall mountain that she could only look up at. Her father didn't speak much either. Every time, he would scold her during training. His rare encouragement would make her so excited that she wouldn't be able to sleep for several days. The number of times she could see her father in the general's estate was few and far between because he was always busy or with her mother. Today was the first time that Shangguan Linglan had talked back to her father without caring about anything. It was also the first time that she had been so firm in her beliefs. It was also the first time that she had heard such solemn words from Shangguan Hongwan. "Lan'er, very good." Shangguan Hongwan patted Shangguan Linglan's shoulder forcefully, then turned and left the hall with a loud laugh. Shangguan Linglan was still standing in the same spot with a dazed expression. She couldn't understand what was going on. She had clearly prepared herself to be beaten. How did she end up being praised by her father? "Little sister, you're really too cool." Her brothers immediately surrounded her and began to praise Shangguan Linglan. They didn't seem to realize that Shangguan Hongwan had said that they weren't talented generals. Instead, they felt that it was a great honor to see their little sister being praised. The prince's estate was completely silent. Chingo finally woke up not long after. His head was hurting badly. He had only woken up for a short while before he drank his medicine and fell asleep again. That day, Jingyu didn't care about the chaos outside. She only focused on stitching up his wounds and wiping his cheeks. Then she left to let Jing Lang change into new clothes for Jing Zhan. She picked an auspicious day to cremate Jing Zhan. It was night. The dim white candles were lit. There was no sound of crying, only the quiet and somewhat frightening sound of burning candles. Jingyu knelt on the mat and licked the paper money for Jing Lang. Her expression was somewhat wooden and didn't change. The pair of different colored eyes looked even deeper in the dark night. Jingyu stopped and knelt on the mat without saying a word. Footsteps sounded behind him. As soon as Xiao Chun stepped into the shabby morning hall, he saw Jingyu's lonely figure. "You are..." Xiao Chun's heart skipped a beat. He took a step forward and squatted beside Jingyu. He raised his head and looked at the empty wooden tablet. "How can I erect a monument for my father when I have yet to take my revenge?" Jingyu knelt down and stared at the white candle sign with her enchanting eyes. She clenched her fists and looked at Xiao Chun, saying, "Xiao Chun, I have become the enemy of the Holy Family. There is no turning back." "You, Jingyu." Xiao Chun's heart suddenly tightened. He stared at Jingyu and said, "Do you want to leave me again?" Jingyu froze when she heard this. She looked at Xiao Chun's anxious and nervous expression. His eyes were so moving. Jingyu's heart ached. She lowered her head and threw herself into Xiao Chun's arms. She rubbed against Xiao Chun's chest and didn't speak. "Jingyu, you are Xiao Chun's woman. Even if I have to abandon the world, I will never abandon you." Xiao Chun wrapped his arms around Jingyu's body and hugged her tightly. It was as if he was afraid that the person in his arms would leave him again. His heartbeat was so real. Xiao Chun carried Jingyu, who had fallen asleep in his arms, back into the house. He gently placed Jingyu on the bed. He looked at the woman who was still frowning in her sleep. Her cheeks were faintly pale. Xiao Chun raised his hand and gently rubbed Jingyu's cheek. Chapter 599. Knock knock. There was a light knock on the door. Xiao Chun paused, withdrew his hand, and stood up to open the door. Xingyi stood by the door and bowed slightly to Xiao Chun. "Master, the emperor has received the news and is gathering the army to head to the prince's mansion. How many people are coming?" Xiao Chun's face slowly darkened as he narrowed his eyes and asked. "Those who should be coming are all here." Xingyi bowed his head and said solemnly. Xiao Chun slowly fell silent. Xingyi stood in place and didn't say anything. "This king knows. You can leave. Do what you need to do," Xiao Chun said flatly and turned to enter the house. Interrogation Officer 1 was slightly taken aback when he heard that. He then bowed and acknowledged the order, carefully closing the door and retreating. When he turned and looked up, his eyes seemed to have made up his mind about something. This night was destined to not be peaceful. The officials of the palace gathered in the main hall to discuss something important. In an exquisite palace in the imperial harem, Ning Xiangyuan was leaning on a soft couch with her brows slightly furrowed. No one knew what she was thinking about. "Your Highness, I heard about it." A young eunuch quickly ran in and said while panting, "This servant sent someone to find out. What's the situation outside? Hurry up and tell me." Ning Xiangyuan suddenly sat up straight and asked. This servant just asked Xiao Lizi in the main palace. He said that the emperor has gathered the army inside and outside the imperial city and is heading to the prince's mansion. The young eunuch said, "Something big happened outside. The 9th imperial concubine's father, Jing Zhan, was surrounded and killed 5 kilometers to the west of the city." "What? Jingyu's father?" Ning Xiangyuan was slightly stunned. She stared at the young eunuch and asked, "Who dares to make a move in the Tokyo imperial city?" The 2 elders of the Holy Family said that they hired countless assassins to kill Lord Jing in front of the 9th imperial concubine. The young eunuch trembled and said, "The most frightening thing is that when Master Jing was killed, the 2 elders of the Holy Family found a person with different pupils. Your Majesty, do you know who this person is?" "Could it be?" Ning Xiangyuan suddenly stood up. Her face instantly turned pale, and her eyes were filled with shock. She looked at the little eunuch in disbelief. "It's the 9th imperial concubine. I heard that the 9th imperial concubine is a monster." He had a pair of different colored eyes, which was really scary. The 9th emperors were also present at the time, and the Holy Family was almost killed. It is said that the people from the general's residence went to control the situation. The little eunuch described it vividly, as if he had experienced it himself. Why would the people from the general's residence go outside the city? Ning Xiangyuan frowned and asked, I heard that the person leading the troops was the daughter of the general's residence. This servant doesn't know what happened. After the little eunuch finished speaking, Ning Xiangyuan's face turned cold. She slowly said, So it was Shangguan Linglan who went to save Jingyu. Your Majesty, everyone is saying that the general is colluding with the Ninth Emperors to rebel. The little eunuch said with a serious face, What does your Majesty plan to do? Hee. Ning Xiangyuan laughed coldly and said, Jingyu will also have such a day. It's retribution. Ha ha ha. Whatever you did to me yesterday, I will do to you twice as much today. Ning Xiangyuan's eyes were filled with ruthlessness as she said, Since you are a monster, then let you have a taste of being cursed by thousands of people. Chapter 600. Go and spread this news. The more you spread it, the better. Ning Xiangyuan's lips curled into a cruel smile as she spoke to the young eunuch. Please speak, Your Highness. The young eunuch trembled and bowed as he replied. Inside the mansion, it was quiet and peaceful. In this dark night, groups of people quietly surrounded the mansion. The layers of soldiers were even stronger than before. No one made the slightest sound. Pairs of nervous and dignified eyes surrounded the mansion. The commoners living around the manor had been silently driven away. There was no one within a 10-mile radius of the manor. They were all soldiers. However, the doors of the manor were still tightly shut. No light could be seen, and no sound could be heard. It was so quiet that it felt abnormal. General Pang, what do we do now? Seeing that all the soldiers had taken their positions and surrounded the manor like an iron bucket, even a bird would not be able to fly out, let alone a person. Wait a little longer. The one called General Pang was the one leading the troops this time. Pang Yuan?
Yes.
The deputy general beside him bowed his head slightly and replied. He continued to look up at the manor in the distance. His sharp eyes swept across the manor as if he wanted to find some clues, but he could not find anything. The sky gradually turned gray, and there were faint signs of daybreak. However, there was still no movement in the manor. At this moment, a figure quickly ran over and handed something in his hand to Pang Yuan. News from that person in the palace. The person dressed as a manservant handed the thing in his hand to Pang Yuan. Pang Yuan frowned and raised his hand to take it. Pang Yuan silently unfolded the piece of paper and glanced at it. His eyes darkened slightly as he raised his head and said, I understand. This humble one will take his leave. The manservant bowed and turned to run away again. Pang Yuan turned his head to look at the majestic manor, and a sense of loss flashed through his heart. He took a deep breath and looked at the faint dawn sky. He frowned and shouted in a deep voice, Attack! Capture the evildoer with abnormal pupils alive. With Pang Yuan's command, all the soldiers stepped forward in unison. At this moment, a sound suddenly rang out in the originally quiet manor. Under everyone's gaze, countless black-clothed men leaped onto the walls of the manor. All of them were dressed in the same way, holding swords in their hands. Their faces were masked and they were dressed in black. An indescribable murderous aura spread out with the appearance of these black-clothed men, and the surroundings fell into a momentary silence. Those who offend Xiao Wangfu will be killed without mercy. One of the black-clothed men pointed his sword at Pang Yuan from afar. The murderous intent in his voice was so strong that Pang Yuan's face turned cold. He raised his hand and slowly pulled out the sword at his waist. He coldly shouted back, slaying evildoers for the good of the people. Kill. Under the command, both sides were entangled together. The black-clothed men were ruthless and merciless, but the soldiers won in numbers. The scene was chaotic and shouts were everywhere. Inside the Xiao Wangfu, Jingyu slightly frowned and opened her eyes. Her pair of different-colored eyes were clear and dazzling. Jingyu slowly sat up and heard footsteps. Jingyu looked up and saw Xiao Chun walking towards her. Awake? Xiao Chun, who was sitting beside Jingyu, raised his head and touched Jingyu's cheek. They came in. Jingyu slightly squinted her eyes and rubbed Xiaoqin's palm. "It's okay, they can't come in," Xiaoqin said without caring. "Did they disturb you?" Chapter 601. Jingyu slowly shook her head. She lowered her head slightly and was silent for a moment. Then she opened her mouth and said, "Cremate the body for father. I want to take father back to the Roman forest." "Okay." Xiaoqin nodded in agreement. Jingyu stood up, tidied her clothes, and opened the door. The sounds of killing were so clear in her ears, but no one had the ability to charge in. Jingyu slightly lowered her eyes and turned to the morning hall. Xing Yi and Xing Er silently went to move firewood and built a simple platform. No one mourned, and no one cried. Everything was so silent. Jingyu watched as Xing Yi and Xing Er moved Jing Zhan's body onto the platform. Emotions appeared in her eyes. Jingyu walked over and squatted by Jing Zhan's side. She looked at Jing Zhan's dark face. He hadn't even finished his makeup in such a hurry. Jingyu raised her hand to caress Jing Zhan's face. The color in her eyes became even brighter. The green was so clear, and the gold was so warm. Xiaoqin stood below the platform with his hands clasped behind his back. He quietly looked at Jingyu. "Your daughter is unfilial. I couldn't arrange a proper funeral for you. Your great hatred has not been avenged. I can't let father be buried with hatred." Jingyu tightly clenched her fists. "If the Holy Family doesn't perish, how can we be worthy of father's 20 years of fear? How can we be worthy of mother's death? The Prime Minister's residence deserves to die, and the Holy Family deserves to die even more." Jingyu bit her lips. Her eyes were filled with ruthlessness. She coldly said, "Father, your daughter will personally avenge your hatred for you." Jingyu's face was pale as he stood at the end of the corridor in the distance. In this quiet scene, he could hear Jingyu's voice so clearly. Jingyu's left hand slowly clenched. Faint streaks of blood appeared in her eyes as she watched Jingyu personally light the torch and light the fire on the haystack. The fire was so big that it engulfed Jing Zhan's body in the blink of an eye. Jingyu stood in the distance and stared at the raging fire without blinking. The sky seemed to be brightening bit by bit in the midst of the fire. "Master." A figure jumped down from the eaves and knelt down on one knee in front of Xiaoqian. He said respectfully, "A large number of soldiers and horses are gathering towards the mansion. If we don't leave now, I'm afraid." Xiaoqian slowly fell silent. He frowned slightly and didn't say anything. "Pack up everything you need to pack. We're leaving." Before Xiaoqian could speak, Jingyu spoke first. Xiaoqian was slightly taken aback when he heard this. He turned to look at Jingyu. "Xiaoqian, are you willing to give up this mansion and leave with me?" Jingyu looked at Xiaoqian with a burning gaze. "I'll listen to madam." Xiaoqian's lips curved slightly. He turned to the black-clothed man and said something. The black-clothed man bowed and quickly left. Xing Yi and Xing Er looked at each other. They turned and began to order everyone to take inventory of their belongings and bring everything they needed. The sounds of killing continued outside, but Jingyu didn't see a single injured person being carried into the mansion. The gates were still tightly shut, isolating them from the outside world. Qinggu also woke up at daybreak. The fire had died down. Jingyu personally placed Jing Zhan's ashes into the urn. She raised her hand and took out a jade bottle the size of a finger. She placed Jing Zhan's ashes into the bottle. Xiaoqian and Jing Lang stood to one side and watched silently. "I have a great vengeance. I must let father see the destruction of the Holy Family. I will scatter these ashes on the grounds of the Holy Family for father to see." Jingyu stood up and looked into the distance as she spoke slowly. "You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.